Will you be remembered after you're dead? The Z-List Deadlist podcast about obscure people from history with me, Iszi Lawrence. Hello and welcome to the Z-List Deadlist. I am Iszi Lawrence and I'm ad-libbing. I'm not going to edit this very much. It is, because basically I've got a lot of information that I want to get from inside of my brain to outside of my mouth to through the ears that you are listening to this into the squelchiness of your brain so you can chew it up and go, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it. Oh, it's not interesting. We've got a long way to go, guys. For those of you who listened to Making History on Radio 4 or listened to, you can still catch it. It's on BBC Sounds and everything else, and on the iTunes and on all the apps and stuff. The last episode we did, I got to interview a guy called Jeremy Dronfeld, and he's written an autobiography. No, he's written a biography about James Barry, who was this amazing revolutionary doctor in the 19th century. For those of you who listen to it, you know where I'm going with this. For those of you who don't, it's a weird one. He is a person who needs to be learnt about. He is a huge character in history, but didn't make the news headlines because news headlines didn't really exist until towards the end of his career. Had there been more newspapers, I imagine he'd have been more of a household name. This is a difficult episode for me. Basically, James Barry was born Margaret Ann Bulkley in Cork in 1789. And she was a girl until 1809, something like that, when James Barry happened. Now, why James Barry happened and why James Barry continued to happen throughout the rest of his life, as far as we know, there might be a bit in the sort of late 1820s where James Barry returned to the UK and we don't know why. Or indeed he could have gone to Ireland and we don't know why. And did he come back and was he a lady at that point or not? Lord Somerset was there. Anyway, we'll get on to Lord Somerset. Point is, now we understand about trans men. We understand that there are people who are born with a male mind and a female body, and they now live as men. And so they go, James Barry, obviously a trans man. Here you have a person who, in their teenage years decides, I'm going to be a man, I'm going to get a career, and I'm going to stay a man until the day I die, and I'm going to write in my will, no, you're not checking. No, I'm a man. No, do not look. Wrap me up in my bed sheets, do not investigate. Thank you very much. So obviously wanted to protect his identity. However, also in his belongings he kept dresses, and he didn't have a girlfriend, and those dresses would have fitted him. So it's a very weird situation because of the timing. Now, I've sat backstage in loads of comedy clubs and I've had the conversation that boys have, which is, if you were Doctor Who, where would you go back in time to? And I'd point out, if I was Doctor Who, back in time isn't much fun if you're a girl. You don't get taken seriously. Now we do have a girl Doctor Who, of course, and they haven't really explored that enough. I think the reason that they need to explore it more is because our Doctor Who, she wears braces and she wears trousers and she doesn't dress as a woman. And this is a huge thing in the past. How you look is kind of how you're treated. It's a bit like if you see a police officer walking down the road and you see that they look exactly like they're in the uniform of a police officer, you're going to go, that's a police officer. And it is illegal to impersonate a police officer. Well, in the past, it was illegal to wear the wrong sort of hat to say that you're a different class of person. It was illegal to own different types of dogs. You weren't allowed to own white dogs if you were common, for example. There was a code to dressing that was so important that if you just dressed as the opposite sex, it kind of wouldn't be questioned in the way that it would be now, because it was just so rigid and so different for that reason. So actually, Doctor Who, the fact she doesn't dress as a woman means that they might have treated her as a man, even though when she obviously is a woman. They might have gone, you're dressed as a man, I will treat you as a man, because that is what my brain has taught me to do. Which does make the whole idea that you can dress up as another gender, does that mean you're actually that gender? Or does that mean you're trying to get around the rules? Because the thing is, right, Margaret was born in Cork and she grew up around soldiers and she kind of wanted to be a soldier. She was kind of romantic about the sea and everything else. And then for whatever reason, we think possibly a tragedy, she ends up in London. and she has an uncle called James Barry, and he is friends with a guy called Francisco de Miranda, I assume is how he would have said his name. Now, he was a Venezuelan revolutionary. He and Margaret concoct this amazing plan, which is she's going to dress up as a man, take her uncle's name, enrol in medical school in Edinburgh, which you could do from a much younger age back in those days. So there were some medical doctors by the age of 16. Easy. That's not. I mean, her degree, or his degree at this point, because he becomes James Barry, was a very good one. It wasn't that unusual for somebody as young as he was to be a doctor. Anyway, he enrolls at medical school up in Edinburgh because the idea is he and Francesco are going to go to Venezuela and they're going to, continue the revolution. Now, whether Margaret planned to be Margaret at that point or James Barry, we do not know, because Francisco de Miranda got himself arrested and he got casted off to Spain, where he was killed. So, this is the interesting point. You are James Barry. You've been treated for the last 3 years as a man, admittedly a very small, because Margaret was not high in stature, squeaky voiced, because she had a squeaky voice, and also female mannerisms as well. It really was bad at impersonating a man, I mean, in the way that we would think now. And later had, costume people to make padding for her because she was really slight. There's like 3 paintings of her. Well, there's 2 paintings of her and 1 photo. Of him. And for my trans friends, do know that this is because whether we treat him as a trans person is really difficult simply because of the context of the time. I mean, let's put it this way. I wouldn't know, going back into the past, if I couldn't pick, even right now, if I couldn't pick, just keeping my general me-ness, so keeping my femininity in the terms of I know I'm a girl, but going out into the world as a man, that does not appeal to me. I remember back in 2001, when I was a teenager, I remember sitting on my bed and watching Victoria Wood on Parkinson.
Didn't you ever think in those days that you might marry a rich fellow and settle down?
I never wanted to get married because I always had a very strong intention of being a man when I grew up, you see. I didn't know. Nobody had told me that you couldn't choose. I thought you could be a girl for a bit and then, you can if you've got enough money for plastic surgery, but then I thought you could choose. And I never wanted to be a girl because to me girls had a really boring time because in the playground, like the boys would be running around and kicking people with polio and having a good time. And the girls would be sitting down with their raincoats tied around their waist by the sleeves to make themselves into ladies. And instead of playing, they were talking. They said, now, I'll tell you what we're going to do, right? You're a lady and I'm a lady. And you come up to me and you say, is that your baby? And I say, yeah. And I think, oh, for God's sake, get on with it. I felt like I was trapped with 47 middle-aged women.
So you didn't want to be a woman?
Didn't want to be a woman at all.
And you didn't like any aspect of being a woman?
No, well, as soon as I had puberty, I thought, who thought of this? This is stupid. Periods, I couldn't even keep track of when Coronation Street was. What is happening? I took breasts. I didn't want them. I'd killed 3 guinea pigs. I couldn't cope with the pair of breasts. The trouble is, even if you look like the back of a pickle factory, if you've got breasts in the school uniform, it was perverts all over again. Wherever I went, you'd be in a bus queue, you think, is that somebody's briefcase? Oh no, it's not. Somebody would give you a lift home and they say, shall we just pull in for a minute? No! Get off!
And there's nobody could tell this to us at all?
No.
No, you were out there on your own. It's a very sad story. I'm always crying.
And that is exactly how I felt. It's exactly how I felt cheated. I, throughout the early years of my youth, had been a tomboy, and I felt cheated by the fact that I now had to be a girl, and I couldn't do all of the fun things. I had to be a woman. And I tell you, if you don't know what I mean, read His Dark Materials and the story of Lyra, because she starts off in Jordan College, and she is so... she's been, indoctrinated by this sort of patriarchal system. She hates the female scholars, and this is why, the woman she later discovers to be her mother seems so appealing. She's unlike any other woman she's met, and she's confident, and she's got guts, And I remember I did a doodle in my notebook, which I might put on social media, because it's depressing, because it's Izzi's Lonely Hearts Club Band, like the Beatles, and all of it. I think there was one girl in my entire Lonely Hearts Club bag, one hero there, and it was Marilyn Monroe, because I absolutely adored her, but there was no big female, because most of my friends were boys. I loved boy culture. I liked, Formula One. I liked motorsports. That was my thing. And I just didn't get this whole idea of trying to attract boys and do the girl thing. But equally, I am a cis female. I just didn't recognise that my feelings were legitimately female. And I wonder if, given, James Barrie's situation, Margaret's situation, I would have done it. I don't know if I'd have lasted as long as she did. But I think, rather than being, dying, going back to London going, oh, well, my plan didn't work, but I've got this doctor, and now I'll just go back to being a disrespected woman, whether I could have handled that. Because as a man, it just gave, her, and I say that I really don't know. I really do not know. But the power that you had, because James Barrie was famous for starting fights and stuff. Well, not fights so much as just being bolshy ass, because you could do that as a boy. You couldn't do that when you're a girl. You couldn't be aggressive. And James was so aggressive. And he would do what the hell he liked. He actually, the bit where he disappears in the 20s, is literally, we just don't know what happened to it. He didn't have orders to return to the UK. He just went. The Crimean War later, he just went because he fancied it. Basically, he graduated in 1812. And he went to Plymouth, and that's when the portrait of him is an hilarious portrait. I'm sorry, but there is no more feminine picture of a young, man that you could have. Big eyes, beautiful rosebud lips, clear skin, just oozing feminine charm. And short little squeaky voiced guy goes down to Cape Town, and he revolutionises the place. He has a little bit of trouble. So in the episode, we sort of touch on his relationship with Lord Somerset, because he and Lord Somerset, who's like the governor of Cape Town, get caught together. And it would have been bad either way, because Lord Somerset was married. But they get accused by the servants of buggery. And I'm assuming, this was the way you would imagine it. But yeah, it was an absolute nightmare for them. And I think this is the saddest part of James Barrie's life, is I think Lord Somerset might have been his only relationship, significant one. And it's curious that when he does abscond and he does go back to the UK, that is roughly about 3 years before Lord Somerset dies. And I'm wondering if that is maybe he visited him, and maybe he visited him in another, persona. Or it might be because I believe his mother was ill at the same time, and he might have gone back to Ireland. But anyway, his career in South Africa was astonishing. He not only revolutionises hospitals, he revolutionises the prison system. He revolutionises all public health. He's big on hygiene, and he basically is doing what Florence Nightingale is doing, 30, 40 years later in the Crimean War. He is doing also, I want to add, the job of about 5 men. Because when he leaves Cape Town, 5 men take it over and can't do it. That is the level of stress and pressure that he puts himself under. I think possibly in this sort of need to prove himself, you can't afford to question my sexuality, my gender identity or anything about me, because I get stuff done. This is what I do. In 1826, and this is utterly amazing, he conducts the first successful caesarean section in the whole of the British Empire. Now that means that both the baby and the mother lived. Often, caesarean sections, when they were done, mother would die, the baby would live. Yay! Not for the mum. But in this case, he managed both mother and baby lived. And Mrs. Munich, who survived, named the baby after him. So So it's James Barry Munich. And in every generation of that family since, there has been a James Barry Munich. So that is the significance. And I think it's obvious. Why? Because he understood female anatomy a bit more than your average doctor would, just because he was the only one with the same anatomy as the women he was working on. And also, he just was into hygiene. He just really respected the idea that you have to keep everything clean and try to be as sterile as possible. And this was before really they understood that at all. So he has lots of ventures in Cape Town. He was an amazing surgeon and bullshit started fights, got reprimanded a lot, but got the job done. And he did end up in Crimea, and he did it voluntarily as well. He wasn't sent to Crimea, he went to Crimea, which, And this was when the press was getting involved, because the whole reason that we know about the Crimean War, the reason we know about Florence Nightingale is they were sending back, this is when the Telegraph, they were sending back messages, and the people were getting the messages that, it appears that our soldiers have nothing to eat and have burnt all the kindling. Crap. And the Russians have closed the roads off. Crap. It was bad. Balaclava was, of all the places you want to go back as Doctor Who, whatever gender, don't go back there. Nasty, nasty times. Really bad. And he went there voluntarily, and he met Florence Nightingale, and I can't imagine what that must have been like for him, because if he was a trans man, then I think he might have been a bit more, here's a woman doing a woman's job and is very respected, getting a lot of press, interesting, but I don't think he'd have taken a her in the way he did, and according to her, he took a her.
I never had such a blackguard rating in all my life. I, who have had more than any woman. Then from this Barry, sitting on his horse while I was crossing the hospital square, with only my cap on in the sun. He kept me standing in the midst of quite a crowd of soldiers, commissariat, servants, camp followers, etc., etc., every one of whom behaved like gentlemen during the scolding I received, while he behaved like a brute. After he was dead, I was told that he was a woman. I should say that she was the most hardened creature I ever met.
And can you blame him? Because if he isn't identifying as male and she has gone, okay, I've been presenting an opportunity, I'm incredibly clever, I'll never get taken seriously as a woman, I'll never have a love in my life, because although I have, been with other women in terms of, tried to woo them jokingly, I've never actually followed through with that. I have a dog, but I don't have that sort of deep personal relationship with anybody because I have sacrificed my sexuality and my own cisgender identity in order to dress as a man so I can have this career, so I can change people's lives, so I can save lives. That's a worthy enough cause, and it causes me a tremendous amount of stress doing that. And then here is a woman who stayed as a woman, who's been presented this opportunity, and here she is. And the thing that James Barry calls her out for isn't what she says, it isn't how she works, what she does, it's what she's wearing. She's not wearing her sun cap. That is giving her a bad example to everybody else. She could get heat stroke as an example. She must be wearing the right things. It's very important for people to wear the correct things, isn't it? You could imagine just the stress of that. Just the stress. Imagine, working away really hard through doing a marathon only to watch somebody else get presented a medal having run 100 metres in your eyes. And Florence Nightingale, my goodness, is a woman who's worked her, I believe her bottom off, her lady parts off, for this opportunity just to try and save lives, and as many lives as possible, and do it efficiently, and have to prove herself again and again and again just because she is a woman. And you can imagine James Barry going, oh, she did it, I could have done it, have I wasted my life? I don't like her very much. But that only works if James Barry isn't a trans man. And he might have been a trans man, and just a bit of a dick. So, there you have it. It's a really sort of tricky life. And he does, he gets ill quite a lot, as you would do in those days. He gets diarrhea a lot and eventually passes from the flu. I think it was the flu. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, he writes in his will not to examine him. So he gets wrapped up into bed sheets, taken off to the morgue. But of course, in the morgue, a woman prepares him for burial. She doesn't know not to touch him. And she notices that he is not a bloke. And so she thinks, brilliant, look at this, scandal. all these doctors can't even recognise a chick when they see one. Oh, I can sue them. Or not even sue them. I could sell my story to the papers and I could get loads of, for her, this is like ka-ching press attention. So what she does is she goes and tries to blackmail his friends. And it doesn't really work out for her.
Sir, I had been intimately acquainted with the doctor for a good many years, both in London and the West Indies, and I never had any suspicion that Dr. Barry was a woman. I attended him during his last illness, previously for bronchitis and the affection of diarrhoea, and on one occasion after Dr. Barry's death, at the office of Sir Charles MacGregor, there was the woman who performed the last offices for Dr. Barry was waiting to speak to me. She wished to obtain some prerequisites of her employment which the lady who kept the lodging-house in which Dr. Barry had died had refused to give to her. Amongst other things, she said that Dr. Barry was a female, and that I was a pretty doctor for not knowing this, and she would not like to be attended by me. I informed her that it was none of my business whether Dr. Barry was male or female, and I thought that he might be neither, be an imperfectly developed man. She then said that she had examined the body, and it was a perfect female, and farther that there were marks of her having had a child when very young. I then inquired how you formed that conclusion. The woman, pointing to the lower part of her stomach, said, "From marks here, i.e. stray gravidarium. I'm a married woman and the mother of 9 children, and I ought to know." The woman seemed to think that she had become acquainted with a great secret and wished to be paid for keeping it. I informed her that all Dr. Barry's relatives were dead, and that it was no secret of mine, and that my own impression was that Dr. Barry was a hermaphrodite. But whether Dr. Barry was male, female, or hermaphrodite I do not know, nor had I any purpose in making the discovery, as I could positively swear to the identity of the body as that being of a person whom I'd been acquainted with as Inspector General of Hospitals for a period of years. Yours faithfully, D.R. Mackinnon.
And you can really see in that letter the attitude of the time, which is, I'm going to completely ignore the fact that James Barry is a woman and that therefore means that women are capable of doing the things men are capable of doing. And instead, I'm going to say, it doesn't matter what gender James Barry was. They were a colleague. And I always assumed a hermaphrodite anyway, so it's fine. It doesn't actually matter. They're a man because, and this is why, this is the beauty of it, in such a gender-divided society, in a roles thing. It doesn't matter that she was a woman, she was dressed as a man, she identified as a man, therefore was a man. Oh my god! It's really, because what I find fascinating, and I had no opinion on it as well, what I find fascinating about trans issues is this idea that there is a definite gender identity. There is a definite, I know I am a woman, no matter what body I am in. I know I am a man, no matter what body I'm in. And it clashes with there is no difference between the sexes, everybody's capable of doing anything, it doesn't matter. Because it does matter, and yet it doesn't matter. And that is why James Barry is so fascinating. Because if he's a trans man, it means he was ultimately the first ever trans man to revolutionise medicine in a way that is completely unrecognised no matter what gender he was. And if he wasn't a trans man, because as a woman he managed to do all of these things that men failed at, and he was brilliant at it. It's so interesting. You've been listening to the Z-List Deadlist podcast with me, Iszi Lawrence. To find out more, please visit izzi.com, that is ISZI.com. To support the show, share this episode with your friends. If you've got any views about it, go to our Facebook page and express them. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Iszi Lawrence, that is ISZI_LAWRENCE. Hopefully see you soon. But a lot to think of, isn't there? Yeah, good old James Barry.